everyone on today? Good morning. We're going to be talking about Athaliah, as I said, as we read. I read these stories in the Bible. The stories about women, all the women of the Bible, is the book that I am actually reading from. And so, just to give you and background on Athaliah, she was the daughter, some scholars say granddaughter, of Omri, king of Israel, from 885 to 874 BC. And the sister, some scholars say daughter of Ahab, king of Israel, 874 through 853 BC. She married King Jehoram, or Joram of Judah, 848 through 841 BC, the son of King Jehoshaphat. Good morning, Mr. J. Good morning. 870 through 848 BC. She became the mother of Athaliah, who became king of Judah on his father's death and ruled in Jerusalem for 1 year, 841 BC. On Azariah's death at the hands of Jehu, anointed king of Israel by the Lord God's command, ruled 841 through 814 BC. She had all the males of royal stock killed and assumed the throne. She ruled Judah as queen, 841 through 835 BC. She was executed when Ahaziah's son Joash rescued and hidden for 6 years in the Lord God's temple by Jehosheba, as Azariah's sister, supported by Jehoiada, the priest and the royal guard, claimed the throne. Joash ruled Judah 835 through 796 BC and restored Israel to the Lord God. So I'm going to be reading out of 2 Kings chapter 8, and then I'm going to go to 2 Chronicles. But the story that I'm going to be reading about is Athaliah and the almost perfect plan. And like I said, we can all take lessons from these things that happen, takeaways, because it's some interesting stuff that goes on that goes on in the Bible with these characters that were in the Bible during that time. And so let's get into 2 Kings. Let me go back to the 2 Kings. Let me find my little bookmark here. But let's get into 2 Kings, and this is going to be chapter 8, and I'm going to be reading some verses out of that, and then I'll skip around, which tells the story of what's going on. So 2 Kings chapter 8, and it's going to be verse 18, and then verses 25 through 26. So they're not really, it's not going to be a lot of reading, but it will be some points, some verses that I will read and stuff like that. So 2 Kings chapter 8. And this is verse is 18, and then we're going to do 25 through 26. So verse 18, and this was during the time that Jehoram, king of Judah, right? And so he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as did the house of Ahab, for the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. And then verses 25 through 26, as Hazael, king of Judah. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, did as Hazael, the son of Joram, king of Judah, began to reign. 22 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, king of Israel. And then we're going to read, I'm going to go to chapter 11, verses 1 through 20. Now, that's kind of long, verses 1 through 20 in chapter 11, verses 1 through 20. Okay. And this is Joash. He was, king of Judah. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed evil. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash the son of Ahaziah and stole him from among the king's sons which were slain, and they hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. So if you read the story about when he hid the baby in the bedchamber from her. And he was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years, and Athaliah did reign over the land. And the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds with the captains and the guards, and brought them to him into the house of the Lord, and made a covenant with them, and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord, and showed them the king's son. And he commanded them, saying, This is the thing that ye shall do. A third part of you that enter in on the Sabbath shall even be keepers of the watch of the king's house. Okay. And a third part shall be at the gate of Sur, and a third part at the gate behind the guard. So shall ye keep the watch of the house, that it be not broken down. And two parts of all you that go forth on the Sabbath, even they shall keep the watch of the house of the Lord about the king. And ye shall compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in his hand. And he that cometh within the ranges, let him be slain. And be ye with the king as he goeth out and as he cometh in. And the captains over the hundreds did according to all things that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and they took every man his men that were to come in on the Sabbath with them that should go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And to the captains over hundreds did the priest give King David spears and shields that were in the temple of the Lord. And the guard stood, every man with his weapons in his hand, round about the king, from the right corner of the temple to the left corner of the temple, along by the altar in the temple. He brought forth the king's son and put the crown upon him and gave him the testimony, and they made him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, God save the king. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and the people, she came to the people into the temple of the Lord. And when she looked, behold, the king stood by a pillar, as the manner was, and the princes and the trumpeters by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew with trumpets. And Athaliah rent her clothes and cried, Treason, treason. But Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds, the officers of the host, and said unto them, Have her forth without the ranges, and him that followeth her kill with the sword. For the priest had said, Let her not be slain in the house of the Lord. And they laid hands on her, and she went by the way by which the horses came into the king's house, and there was she slain. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, and that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal and brake it down. His altars and his images brake they in pieces thoroughly, and slew Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. And he took the rulers over hundreds, and the captains, and the guard, and all the people of the land. And they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house. And he sat on the throne of the kings. Verse 20. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet. And they slew Athaliah with the sword beside the king's house. Now, in this right here, Athaliah, right? She was the only non-Davidic ruler in Judah's history, and she was queen during a 6-year reign of terror. This daughter of wicked Ahab and Jezebel had married Jehoram, and the son of Judah's king Jehoshaphat, when King Ahaziah, the only son of Jehoram, and Athaliah was killed in Jehu's purge of Ahab's house during a visit to the north. Now, the treacherous Athaliah mounted Judah's throne and attempted to purge it of David's descendants, including all of her grandsons. However, Jehosheba, the wife of the high priest Jehoiada, hid the infant son of Athaliah, which I just read to you, of Azahiah, hid the infant son of Azahiah named Joash, and thereby preserved the Davidic line from which the Messiah would be born. Now, Jehoiada, the husband of Jehosheba, was the high priest, right, of the Lord during Athaliah's reign in the southern kingdom. He instigated Athaliah's overthrow, set Joash on the throne, and guided him in devotion to the Lord. Now, what Jehoiada did preserve the messianic line, he effectively directed the young king Joash in renewing the covenant between the Lord and his people, and in destroying the religion of Baal, okay, and destroying the religion of Baal. So there was some stuff going on, and then we're going to get to 2 Chronicles verse 21. Second Chronicles 21, chapter 21 verse 6, and right here. And then he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, like as did the house of Ahab, who had the daughter of Ahab to wife, and he wrought that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord. And that was Jehoram. He was the king of Judah at that time. And then we're going to go to chapter 22, verses 2, and then 10 through 12. But when Athaliah, now this was during the murder of the royal family. But when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal of the house of Judah. But Jehoshaphat, the daughter of the king, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons that were slain, and put him and his nurse in a bedchamber, so that Joshebed, the daughter of King Jehoram, the wife of Jehoiada the priest, for she was the sister of Ahaziah, hid him from Athaliah so that she slew him not. And he was with them, hid in the house of God 6 years, and Athaliah reigned over the land. And then we're going to go to chapter 23, verse 1 through 15. And then verse 21, and then we'll read 24 and then verse 7. So 23, 1 through 15. And so this was still in the murder of the royal family. I know, isn't that the truth? They're not. And that's what I'm saying, is like it was all these different family members and things like that, and they weren't loyal, because you think how they hid the baby in the bed chamber, and then she was over there ruling and she didn't know, and they were killing each other. It's very interesting, and that's why it's like I like to bring things like this out of the Bible, because it's like some stuff that goes on right here in day-to-day society of the stuff that happens here, and people don't really see it a lot of times unless you go and start to read, and you will see that it's a lot of foolishness and a lot of disloyalty, a lot of killings and murders and things that people are doing right to the day. So it's nothing new. Nothing is new under the sun. So chapter 23, and in the 7th year, Jehoiada strengthened himself and took the captains of hundreds, Azariah the son of Jehoram, and Ishmael the son of Jehohanan, and Azariah the son of Obed, and Maaseiah and the son of Adiah, and Eliphalet the son of Zikri, into covenant with him. And they went about in Judah and gathered the Levites out of all the cities of Judah and the chief of the fathers of Israel, and they came to Jerusalem. And all the congregation made a covenant with the king in the house of God. And he said unto them, Behold, the king's son shall reign, as the Lord hath said of the sons of David. This is the thing that ye shall do. A third part of you entering on the Sabbath of the priests and of the Levites shall be porters of the doors. And a third part shall be at the king's house, and a third part at the gate of the foundation. And all the people shall be in the courts of the house of the Lord. But let none come into the house of the Lord, save the priests, and they that minister of the Levites, they shall go in, for they are holy, but all the people shall keep the watch of the Lord. And the Levites shall compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in his hand, and whosoever else coming into the house, he shall be put to death. But be you with the king when he cometh in and when he goeth out. So the Levites and all of Judah did according to all things that Jehoiada the priest had commanded, and took every man his men that were to come in on the Sabbath, with them that were to go out on the Sabbath, for Jehoiada the priest dismissed not the courses. Moreover, Jehoiada the priest delivered to the captains of hundreds of spears and bucklers and shields that had been King David's, which were in the house of God. And he set all the people, every man having his weapon in his hand, from the right side of the temple to the left side of the temple, along by the altar and the temple by the king around about. Then they brought out the king's son and put up on him the crown, and gave him the testimony, and made him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him and said, God save the king. Now when Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and praising the king, she came to the people into the house of the Lord. And she looked, and behold, the king stood at his pillar at the entering in, and the princes and the trumpets by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and sounded with trumpets, all the singers with instruments of music, and such as taught to sing praise. Then Athaliah rent her clothes and said, Treason, treason. Then Jehoiada the priest brought out the captains of hundreds that were set over the host, and said unto them, Have her forth of the ranges, and whoso follow her, let him be slain with the sword. For the priest said, Slay her not in the house of the Lord. So they had laid hands on her, and when she was come to the entering of the horse gate by the king's house, they slew her. They didn't want her slain in the house of the Lord, but they wanted her killed. Ain't that something? And then verse 21, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet. After that, they had slain Athaliah with the sword. And then we're going to read I'm going to read verse 24, chapter 24, verse 7. And for the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman had broken up the house of God, and also all the delicate things of the house of the Lord did they bestow upon Balaam. So I am going to read this story, and this was almost the perfect plan. Athaliah and the almost perfect plan. It had all been so smooth, almost easy. Queen Athaliah reflected, watching in the bronze mirrors. Her maid combed her lustrous black hair. She had lustrous black hair. The jeweled combs, the ones with the ruby flowers, I think, she said to her reflection. And her maid nodded. Yes, mistress, the red gown with them, or the ivory. The red, yes, the red will do very nicely, she said and smiled. The smile was not a nice one. bit more. Yes, red will do very well indeed. Red was for blood, wasn't it? And blood was life. Her life before, now, and always. Oh, how that kept coming back that last day before. Before everything, she thought. Before I was myself. When I was only someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother. Beholden, bitten, constrained, weak. So she's saying that at that time, she was a weak woman, right? So it had not been a bad life. Exactly, she reflected, only limited. So she felt her life was limited, blocked, powerless, really. As Ahab of Israel's baby sister, she had lived in the court he kept with Jezebel and had tasted the heady brew of absolute authority and worship of Baal and the Canaanite pantheon in defiance even of the Lord God's prophet. When she married, she wore her own crown and called a king husband, but found the power she had sought had no substance, only ceremony. Then Jehoram had died, not in kingly fashion, but like a miskilled beast, his bowels consumed in an agony of pain and stomach turning stink she could still smell. And that was 6 years ago, she reminded herself, taking a deep breath of the unguents her maid was working into her hair as she dressed it. That death had changed everything. How blind I was until then, she mused, and how quickly I had to learn how to see. And with her son Athaliah taking his father's place as king of Judah, she had far more responsibility, of course. Jehoram had been an able king, but this son of his, the youngest, had no training. His rule had been an accident, she thought. If the Arabs and the Philistines had not killed his older brother, he would never have ruled. If the Arabs, and Philistines had not killed his older brother, he would never have ruled. So she took over his training, though subtly Jezebel had taught her well. Like his father, Ahaziah had been amenable to the worship of the Canaanite god she favored. The priests of the Lord God she scorned and taught him to do the same. Jehoram had not needed teaching, she remembered, and suppressed a sigh. She still missed him. Then the unthinkable had happened. In the first year of his reign, Ahaziah had been killed by Jehu, sent by the Lord God, he said, as part of his program to wipe out the house of Ahab. Jehu had killed Ahab's son, Jehoram of Israel, at the same time, and had followed it up with the elimination of Jezebel, whose own eunuch, had at Jehu's challenge, tossed her out of the window of her own palace in Jezreel to smash on the stones of the courtyard. My, that's some things. Man, they was vicious back then. Dogs had eaten her flesh after Jehu had ridden over it on horseback and left it there. Good morning, Vet. How you doing on today? How you doing? Dogs had eaten her flesh after Jehu had ridden over it on horseback and left it there unburied, a fate that still made her shiver at the man's cruelty, though he had piously declared that the whole thing was the Lord God's doing. And if that's true, she said, whenever she thought back on the grisly end of her motto in queenship, no, he's not in here messing with me. Not today. Not today. He actually is man, this is some stuff. Me and Mr. J had, he's giving me some information. He's right. I was like, these people, they was just like, they was up here doing all type of stuff. As a matter of fact, these people was cruel. They were cruel. They was plotting stuff in their minds. And it seemed like Athaliah was plotting stuff from when she was younger. She was younger doing these plots, and she was like, I'm going to get vengeance whenever I get it. So now she thinking about how she's going to get even with these people. But getting back to this about how that they followed it up with the elimination of Jezebel, whose own eunuchs had, at Jehu's challenge, tossed her out the window of her own palace in Jezreel to smash on the stones of the courtyard. That's some crazy stuff. And then the dogs had eaten her flesh after Jehu had ridden over it on horseback and left it there unburied. Can you imagine riding over someone after you throw them out and then riding over them on horseback? That's some cruelty. So they go on to say, a fate that still made her shiver at the man's cruelty, though he had piously declared that the whole thing was the Lord God's doing. And if that's true, she said, whenever she thought back on the grisly end of her motto and queenship, I'm certainly glad that he's no God of mine. Let me tell you, I have to agree with that. I'm glad he's not a God of mine, because if the God that I serve is sending people to do that to me, I can't worship like that. You see what I'm saying? That's some crazy stuff. Don't they have, I mean, like, isn't that true though? That's what I was saying. They was in here doing some crazy stuff, man, crossing each other. I mean, because she has her own eunuchs is what did that to her. Her own eunuchs turned on her, man. That's some crazy stuff. But but Ahaziah's death had been a blow that had almost finished her, would have, except that she had known what would happen if she gave way and took action to prevent it. She still did much like what she had done, but as she asked herself in a well-worn dialogue of justification, what else was I to do? There was no one left strong enough to rule. Jehu would have conquered the kingdom, and that would have ended everything. Worship of our gods, anonymity of the throne, freedom, my own life. I had to secure the throne to save us all, and I had to act instantly. Unconsciously, she shrugged and shook her head. Hastily, her maid backed away, and she rose. All that blood, she murmured, raising her arms as the maid slipped the red gown over her head. All that blood, but it was worth it. And I had to, if I had left even a single heir of Joram's alive, but I didn't. And now I'm safe. My plan worked. It was perfect. I am the queen, and I shall hold this kingdom no matter what. Jezebel will have been proud of me. I did it. Arranging the folds of the gown, she smiled. The crown. Her maid handed it to her, and as she placed it carefully on her head, they both heard a roar coming from the temple. They exchanged a single startled glance. Then the king, whipping up the modest train of her gown and hand, ran from the door. Pushing into the temple, Athaliah saw a huge crowd. Temple guards armed to the teeth, the heads of families, everyone who could squeeze a way in, and they were shouting something that sounded like, "Long live the king!" Shocked, the queen caught her breath. How could this be happening? She had had all the heirs of Joram killed. Her eyes found her enemy, the despised priest of the Lord God, Jehoiada, and at once, but the 7-year-old standing by the pillar in the king's palace, surrounded by the armed circle of temple guards, crowned and carrying a copy of the Lord God's law, she did not know who was this impostor. And then she recognized Ahaziah's sister, Jehosheba, standing next to her husband Jehoiada with a smile of triumph, and remembered Joash, Ahaziah's son. That she must have hidden the brat. They'll never get away with it, flashed through Queen Athaliah's mind. Treason! Treason! She screamed with all her power, ripping her red gown from her shoulder to hem. Her enraged voice cut through the shouts of rejoicing like a sword, creating the distance of silence she waited for her people to feel. But it was Jehoiada who filled it. You can't kill her in the temple of the Lord God, he said to the captain of the guard. So take her outside the precincts and put to the sword any who dares to follow her. And as she felt her arms gripped by the guards and began to move numb, unresisting, toward the palace and the entry to the gate of the horses, Queen Athaliah knew with a chill that invaded her bones that her perfect plan had failed utterly and that she had finally lost everything. All that blood, she murmured regretfully, and it did no good at all. So that is Athaliah and the almost perfect plan. Now, I am reading all the women in the Bible. This is where this is coming from, this particular book. Let me show that to you. All the women in the Bible. And there was some good women in the Bible and some really bad women in the Bible. See, she had a plan, but it failed her. This plan of her getting revenge and coming after people failed her. It did not last. But the people you can see in the Bible, and it's other women in the Bible too, but these are just the one stories that they've highlighted in here. And the next story we're going to read is Bathsheba and the rising of the spring. But these women, some of them were just bad women. They were like vengeful, vindictive women and deceptive, and they were really doing some things. And so, we always highlight what a lot of times people highlight. I'll say this, a lot of times people highlight what men do, but it was some women in the Bible that were really vindictive women. And when we look at some of the things that's happening in society, we see the same thing. We see similar characteristics of the vindictiveness. We see similar things of the lying, deceit. I'm gonna get vengeance. I don't like you. I'm gonna hurt you. I'm scorned. We see a lot of that. And so it's good to highlight it. Exactly, Vet. And it sounds exactly, even some people we don't know, but we've learned about just on social media and just with some of the things that we've seen the men go through in these trials and, being convicted falsely and things like that. So it's good to highlight, the not always talk about, look at what men are doing, but what about what women did? And what about what they're doing now? And so we can see the similarities and things like that on what's actually taking place and what took place in the Bible. And so I'm bringing these stories. And so, it's good to try to, just give a little insight and also, some takeaways on, what really went on then and what we're seeing now. And it's really not that different of what we're seeing. You know what I'm saying? With all of the craziness that we see and the women doing the things that, that we've seen in the Bible and what we see now. So with that being said, I won't keep you all, but I will be coming on, and we will be talking about the next story with Bathsheba and the rising of the spring. And a lot of these women also in the Bible, most people know these people, Bathsheba and, Athaliah was one of the people. We read the scriptures, but then we don't always remember every single name, because some of these names can kind of be a little challenging to pronounce. But you can get to them the more you read them, and things like that. But this was Athaliah and the almost perfect plan, which failed. And we see some plans failing now, even though things have happened. But we also seeing that God exposes people for who they are. And in the end, God does get the glory. In the end, he gets the glory. And so it's important to understand that too. And God has a plan. But like I said, that God that threw her down out of her window into the courtyard, and then she was ran over on horseback. That's not the God I serve. That's some crazy stuff right there. And I was like, whoa, that was some really crazy stuff. But anyway, you guys have a very beautiful day. I will be back with, of course, my other videos that I get out there. I'm getting ready to get out here and stick with it and do my 6 weeks that I've been doing forever. But I'm getting ready to get out here and get my exercise on. And I will see you all on the next time. See you soon. God bless you. Have a beautiful day and be safe out there and choose kindness. God bless you all. Peace out.